Good afternoon, everyone. Hello on this beautiful October afternoon. It's our pleasure to welcome you here today to the Scoville Memorial Library. My name is Karen Goodell and I'm the director here. And we're proud to co-sponsor this event with the Salisbury Association. And we always like to be on the cutting edge of programming in the community. Following today's presentation, I invite all of you to walk over to the Academy building where they are having a reception and opening their new exhibit, When the World Came to Salisbury, celebrating the Holley knife collection. And today it's our honor to have Theodore Rudd O'Neill, the great-great-great-grandson of Alexander Holley, who founded the Holley Manufacturing Company in 1844. And today we're going to have fun with knives. And learn a little bit more about this important slice of local history. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. I didn't plan for any kind of knife-related jokes, so I'm gonna have trouble following this. The Holley Manufacturing Company obviously is part of my family. My family's lived here since has been landowner in Lakeville since 1795, but before that they were from Sharon. The Holleys lived in Sharon first. So been around for a while. And so I was asked to talk about the Holley Manufacturing Company, but I was also asked to talk about sort of knife things in general. There's a lot of history that I've got about the company at the Salisbury Association, and the display that they've redone of the knives that were used at the World's Fair is just fantastic. I encourage all of you to go over there afterwards and take a look. They're just gorgeous. They've done a great job. And so I wanted to ask first, because it's sort of relevant. How many people here have it's like a feeling or know what a machinist is or a tool and die maker? Machinist or a tool and die maker? Okay, how many people know what a Wall Street equity analyst is? Okay, so I'm both. I had a very unusual upbringing. Well, even though I was a smarty pants in the school and had an incredible memory, my dad thought it'd be really great if I started working in a factory at 14. So I actually picked up some skills at working in a machine shop, and I picked some skills in working in a machine shop, and where I learned how to sharpen tools in order to cut metal. And it turns out that the technique for doing that, the kind of thing you want to do to a piece of metal to cut other metal, is exactly the same way you want to sharpen a knife in order to cut open a person in surgery or make a razor blade. They're completely in common. They have total commonality. Now I'll explain how that works. But it got me thinking about sharpness in knives because I'm the cook in the family. I've always been the cook in my family. My mom was a great cook, and I learned from her. And so I had this sort of very young experience before I was out on my own about how to manipulate metal to cut other metal. And it got me sort of think about knives too. And of course, some runs in the family. So we're going to talk about the iron industry briefly because it's relevant. Why this is the perfect place, what makes the perfect place for a furnace, something about iron manufacturing. Things you didn't know about knives, something about knife sharpening, and about different in knives between Eastern and Western knives. And Eastern, I mean Asian knives. So that's me. So the iron industry in Salisbury, why is this here? Well, the early settlers found some unique geological features of the area. You had iron ore and limestone poking up out of the ground. So you didn't need to go very far to mine it. You could just completely do mining from the surface. We also had abundant old growth forests, which would be used to make charcoal. And we had spring-fed lakes, and spring-fed lakes is super for water power because you don't have to wait for it to rain. You don't have to worry about streams filling up and then running down. If you've got a spring-fed, it's almost a constant source, consistent source, and you can build your water wheel and equipment to match that source. What they didn't know at the time, though, was that the chemical composition of the iron ore here turned out to be pretty fabulous. And what makes it fabulous is that you could make iron ore out of almost any kind of iron. You can make iron out of almost any kind of iron ore you would find, except that if you want it to be not brittle, you want it to be able to hammer it into shape and not have it break in half. You want to be able to use it as an anchor, and you pull the anchor up. You want the whole thing to come back up and not break off parts of it. And it turned out that the chemical composition of what we had here in Salisbury was better than anything around. And so a lot of different furnaces used the iron that came out of the mines by Ore Hill. And like I said, we had spring-fed lakes. You had Lakewood on Scopomic, you had the Riga Lakes, both spring-fed, and you had Salmon Kill, which used some of the spring-fed lake from Riga. And as a result of all these confluence of features, I started making iron here in the 1700s. And then where we come in is that my fifth great grandfather, Luther Holley, who moved here from Sharon, bought all of them. He bought all of them in 1799 for $16,250. Where he got the money, I don't know. He also bought 600 acres on Belgo, I've got the last of 26 of those right now. So he became really the big kahuna in that. And the iron manufacturing itself ceased in the 1830s at Lakeville. It ceased in Mount Riga in the 1860s and kept going in Lime Rock until 1916. And what they were making back then were two things. One is cast objects. So these would be things where you would take specialized sand, make a shape, pour in the iron, let it cool, and then do some minor machining on it. And you could make a cannon or a cannonball or a kettle like this out next to the Salisbury Association. Frying pans, some rudimentary tools. And then the other thing they made is strips of metal or iron metal ingots, which they would sell to other people to make other things like nails, to make door hinges, to make screws, to make parts of wagon wheels. So I collected this from our old family dump. This is the metal frame that went around the wagon wheel. So this was, the wood rots away, but the metal's still here. And so this is an example of what you would do with a strip of iron. Is you could make it into part of hold the wagon wheel together.
That's some wagon.
Yeah, that's a big wagon wheel. And interesting too, there's another thing that's worth pointing out here about the town. There's a die for hammering metal into strips. It's right next to the town hall. And what they've done here is they put this is the base of the die. And this is the anvil, which comes down and hammers it into shape. And whoever set this up, put the anvil in upside down. That part goes down into that part. I'm hoping they'll turn it around so it'll make more sense to people, but that shows you that, I mean, there was a market for just making long, thin strips of metal, and there were lots of different uses for it. So the Holley Manufacturing Company. So the Holley's owns this factory that was making iron ore, and they stopped making iron. It went out of operation in 1830. You know, the Riga kept going until 60s, Lime Rock going into the early 1900s. But the factory, the furnace in Lakeville stopped in 1830. So Alexander Hamilton Holley was looking for something to do with this empty factory. His only son had already left. His only son went to England, bought the rights for the Bessemer steel process in the US, and then worked with Andrew Carnegie, setting up all his steel plants across the United States. So he was out of here. Didn't have a son to take any interest in it. And he was looking for something to do with his empty factory. So I have heard he tried to buy a thread making business, which didn't work out. But we understand the Waterville Knife Company, which started in 1843, it almost immediately went bankrupt. Is likely he bought parts of that business and brought the employees up here and started the Holley Manufacturing Company making knives. It was founded in 1844 by Alexander Holley and George Merwin as Holley and Merwin. They claim to be the oldest manufacturer. I'm not sure that's true. The Waterville Knife Company, which I believe they bought, started in 1843, but they went bankrupt multiple times. They did come back to life. There was a lot of knife making going on in Connecticut at the time. There were a lot of skilled people from Sheffield, England. It was just a natural thing to do with all the water power we had here. In 1854, it became the Holley Manufacturing Company. So Alexander Hamilton Holley, third great grandfather, was president. George Burrell, he also was part of the banking families here in town. And then William B. Rudd, so there's the Rudd part for my name comes in. He married Alexander Hamilton Holley's only daughter. And so that's where the Rudds snuck into the family and took over Hollywood and took over with the rest of it. That's why the Rudds are here. But there are still Holleys left in Brooklyn. But they were connected with the son that went to set up the Bessemer steel process plants for Andrew Carnegie. And so William's son, Malcolm, took over as general manager until 1942. And Malcolm, I think, was head of the Salisbury Association. So the sales of the company were okay, $50,000 a year, $10,000 a year near the end, and then the firm went into decline after 1933. And I think what did the company in is that Malcolm, who was the general manager, had already left for Hartford, where he was taking a position, a job with the state. And he was already living in Hartford in 1930, so it seemed likely that there's no management interest in keeping it going. And there was a depression, so that probably didn't help either. And Malcolm had brothers, but all the brothers were doing other things, so they were not here. Now, that sort of wraps up the Holley Manufacturing Company. But I was also asked to talk about knives in general. And I will wonder if any of you ever thought about this, that how can they say that a knife could never need sharpening? Or how can they say that it's razor sharp? When everybody knows knives don't stay sharp forever. So how can they get away with making these claims? And the answer, this is very important about knives, is that there's no standard for sharpness. So there is no agreed upon standard for what makes something sharp. Now, you can imagine that there's a way to do it. You could take a knife, you could set a kilogram weight on top of it and see how long it takes to cut through a piece of cheese. You could, any number of these things where you could use a knife, sharpen it, use a weight, time it, see how it goes, but no one has ever done that. So if you claim that this is a knife sharpener, no one can dispute it. And all the knife companies know this. So they can make whatever claims they want about their knives. No one can sue them because there is no measurement for that. So as a result, I will tell you, these are not knife sharpeners. These are interesting things that they're selling online, which may make the knife appear to function better than it was before. but is not a knife sharpener. And this is not a knife sharpener either, okay? This is I'll tell you what this does. When a knife is properly sharpened, a tiny little burr of metal is created right along the edge of the knife. And that has to get knocked off, but what's left behind is a very, very, very sharp edge that can bend over time. And what this does is it straightens the edge back up. So it's not doing any sharpening, but it's not doing any sharpening at all, but it's sort of restoring the edge to at least where it should be. The edge won't be sharper, but it'll be straighter and truer. So that has value. You can definitely, it's definitely worth having one of those to keep it going as long as you can on your knife, but eventually it has to get sharpened. And I've got a couple examples of sharpeners. I brought two with me. This one here, which I found on Amazon yesterday, this looks fantastic. This is a stone. You can set this thing in your sink, turn on the water, so it gets wet, and then it's got these lovely little angle things on here to help you set your knife at the right angle to sharpen it. And they have a video online, the rest of it, looks like a pretty good deal, frankly. I don't use I do it by hand, but I use the same kind of stone at home. And you put it in the sink, you don't need oil, just need water on it. Works pretty well. The other one is a wheel, and I brought a wheel that I use here off to the side. That wheel looks great, but that's not a home use option for many because it's $500. And what you're trying to do with this is you're trying to come up with a cross section of the knife that has the right geometry. And there are 3 different ways to sharpen a knife that will give you 3 different geometries of the knife blade. So one is convex, and that's where it curves down. As you can see in the picture there, it curves down. And that's the sort of one that if you had a piece of sandpaper on a built sander and you push the knife against it, it would make this sort of rounded convex shape. It's not ideal, but it's better than nothing. The next one is the flat surface, and the flat you will get on a flat stone. The same surface you get on a flat stone. That's much better. The best is concave, and that's rounded, and the only way you get that is if it's sharpened on a wheel. So that's the contour of the wheel that makes that. And that's how you get a scalpel, and that's how you get a razor blade. If you sharpen your knife like this, you can shave with it. If you sharpen your knife like this, you will cut yourself. And if you sharpen your knife like this and try to shave with it, you'll be in big trouble. But this will give you, that's the most of the stuff that comes from factories. That's the way it's sharpened. Oh, and I says it here too, but if you get cut with this, just like with this surgeon scalpel, it heals pretty quickly. Because it's a really nice cut. But that's the sharpest way the sharpest you can get your knives. Now, another thing I wanted to talk about was Asian versus Western knives. Western knives, I don't know what happened to people. I think they were thinking about swords and scabbards, and they thought, well, we should just make something that's smaller than a sword to use for cutting food. And so you ended up with these Western knives, which have this bolster thing here, which is a big chunk of metal at the end. This is not a good idea. And I'll tell you why, because if you compare it to the Asian knives, which are on the left-hand side, there's no bolster there. It's just the knife just goes straight all the way back. The advantage of that is that you can sharpen this knife forever. As long as you keep sharpening it, it just keeps going back and back and back. If you try to sharpen this, eventually this part goes sideways and the bolster is still there, which interferes with you cutting. So if you want to keep sharpening this to keep it as the same geometry as you had when it was new, you have to take a grinding wheel and cut this part off. So the Asians thought about this, that's why their knives are like this, because they expect Mama San is in the kitchen, keeping her knives sharp. And she can't do it if she has to find a grinding wheel to take a chunk of metal off in order to keep the knife sharp. Cause she's out there chopping a lot of stuff, and so that's the Asian knife, the Asian knife. The bolster thing is just a bad idea. The other thing, oh yeah, and the Asian knives are made of harder steel. So they're made of significantly harder steel than they use in Western knives. And I mean, any Western knife with that kind of bolster, anything that comes from pretty much from Germany, is a softer metal than what the Asians use for metal. And that means they'll stay sharp longer. And I can tell you, from personal experience, is 100% true. And hardness is an engineering standard that's recognized all over the world. So when they say they have harder steel, it is in fact true. And it's so for my final tips, I would say, look for knives with no bolster. You might think about getting Japanese knives, leaning towards Japanese knives because they stay sharp longer. And then you might want to think about getting just a simple stone to keep your own knives sharp at home. Or you can just go to Lindell's in Canaan, because they will sharpen them for you too. They have a machine to do that. And I think it's a pretty good machine too. I think it might actually be a wheel and not a piece of sand, not sandpaper. So I'm happy to take questions. So we're in the back.
So Theo, as I recall, at some point you were volunteering knife sharpening, or was that at the school, or you used to,
Yes.
do you still do that?
No, I did it. Knife sharpening is a fundraiser for Salisbury Central while my son was at Salisbury Central. And it was the biggest fundraiser of any event we ever did at Salisbury Central. We would do it right before Thanksgiving. It was a big success. I don't know why they haven't asked me to come back and do that again. Yes, ma'am.
In the old days, they used to have trucks that came by
Yes,
that sharpened knives and scissors.
yeah.
I think they had a wheel, but I mean, do you think we could have trusted those sharpener people?
Yeah, so they still exist in New York City.
Do they?
Yeah, they'll still come over to your house and they'll still come to your building. If your doorman calls them up, they'll bring the truck over and there's a guy in the back with a big stone. He's going like this with your knives. And that entire business is run by the mom. Okay, all the restaurants and all the buildings there, all the doormen have these connections and they're all mom. Right.
It's good to know.
Yes.
So the Salisbury Association, on Saturday, the weekend of, Veterans Day, November, whatever that is. So I don't know the time yet, but, Nick the knife is coming with his wheel. You'll be able to sign up. We're working out all the details. And it's only knives, no tools, no scissors, just knives. So, so stay tuned for all of the advertisement on that and get your knives sharp, for your Thanksgiving turkey. So we'll keep you posted on that.
That's good.
Yeah.
Who's Nick the
Yes.
Knife?
Nick the knife, he's a man from Cornwall.
Okay.
Yes.
Free mob connections.
In New York, they used to have a guy on what looked like a bicycle with
Yeah.
a sharpening
Yeah.
stone. And he would come around and sharpen knives on his bicycle, whatever it was.
Yeah.
And the other question is, my granddaughter in Greenwich wants to know if the Bush Holley Museum is associated with the Holley family.
I believe it is.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yes, sir.
Who makes the best pocket knives now?
Oh, I don't have an answer for that. I don't know I don't know.
Holley.
I don't. I don't know.
Japanese,
I don't know, but I saw some that were over $1,000 online.
Japanese?
They might have been Japanese, but I'm sure they were handmade, but it seems like a lot of money, so, but I don't know.
But
Yeah, yes, yeah,
Yeah, I've had a red knife, a serrated edge sharpened. It looked like it took off some of the
teeth,
teeth.
yeah.
What's your thoughts on sharpening serrated edge knives?
Throw it away and get a new one. Yeah, it can't be done. Yeah, because there's no way to do it because to sharpen it, you would need to have an infinite number of radius stones to go actually each one of those little radiuses. So what they do is just try to sharpen it like any other knife, and it just cuts all the teeth off it. I just throw them away after a while. We just throw them away to get a new one. Yes, sir.
Didn't somebody try to bring the Holley knife name back in recent years?
Yes.
I think I have a newer one.
Yes, a friend of mine tried to do that and
Didn't work out.
it was not entirely successful.
They were beautiful knives that he made.
Yeah, he did a nice
He
job
did
and
a great job.
he was,
Well, you can't carry a pocket knife now.
right, because you can't, yeah, you gotta check your luggage. That's, then, yes, ma'am.
Are any of the old Holley knives still around? Do you have any in your kitchen drawers?
So, yes, they're still around and they're all across the street over at the Salisbury. But for show and tell, I have a large collection of Holley Manufacturing Company straight razors, which I have placed over here, which you can all take a look at. I also have a piece of iron ore that came out of the ore mine here in town, which we should also take a look at. It's, a lot of us think about how are they carrying, these rocks up to Mount Riga and then throwing them into the furnace. Well, these rocks aren't that dense, so you can actually get a whole bunch of them. And they're also, you don't need explosives to get it out of the ground. Pickaxe will break it up enough. And then you just throw it in the back of the satchel on the ox and send it up to Mount Riga. And if you didn't know that ore bed that's over on 44 Ore Hill Road, Ore Hill was Mount Riga Road, that went all the way up to Mount Riga. And there's a path still there that you can walk.
And the pond there is the ore mine.
Yes,
That was the ore mine.
That was the ore mine.
Water.
yep.
Is there still ore laying around?
Oh, there's a ton of ore. So the ore runs from that pond up through my property on Belgo and continues on across the street, probably up Lincoln City. And I know this because when we dug a well, our well is 700 feet deep. I'm up on Belgo. Every time I clean the filter out of it, there's these iron particles, which you can collect with a magnet that look just like this. So, yeah, so we drilled right through it. It's still there. Yes, sir.
This is not a knife story, but it's an iron story. The iron manufacturing in Lime Rock was railroad car wheels. That's what they were doing there.
Mhm.
And I think that went to maybe 1919 or 1920.
Yep.
And when I was organizing a history tour that included a lot of iron stuff, I interviewed this guy named Chilio Berti. And he was actually in that iron ore as a child when it was still working. And he said at the end, so if you could have a mold, when you let the iron out of the furnace, you could have a mold in sand.
Yeah.
Iron would come in and fill up that mold. He said at the end of the workday, they would take a chunk of that molten iron and throw it in a tub of water. And that would heat up the water for the folks to wash up.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, makes a lot of sense. Yes, ma'am.
Are any of the more cast products from the Holley Manufacturing Company around, not necessarily knives, but like household
Oh.
kettles or pans and things like
So,
marked?
In front of the Salisbury Association, there's a big kettle.
Right,
Um,
what about household?
I don't know. We didn't save any.
Well, Bill, isn't the cannon supposedly something that was forged here in Salisbury? Is it the Salisbury Association?
In Lakeville.
Yeah. I mean, there are some things like that around, but they were done in Salisbury.
But I don't think the Holley Knife Company would be dealing with that.
No,
Yeah,
right.
the forge had closed,
Before
you
that.
pointed out in what, 36 or something like that, 1836. And so, by the time the knife factory came along, the iron forges were sort of closed down in Lakeville.
In Lakeville, yeah.
Yeah, it's a tail end.
Yes, back,
How many people were employed? By Holley?
oh, I should know that number. I don't.
Maximum was 85.
There we go. There's
85.
85. Oh,
I think there was also, Salisbury Furnace was producing, furnaces, which were basically boxes. And at the Salisbury Association, there's the front of what it says Salisbury Furnace. And that was from 95. It was pretty early.
that could have just meant that it was, they called it the Salisbury Furnace. It wasn't necessarily a furnace.
No, it wasn't, but it
Oh,
was
okay.
like a box.
Yeah,
And we heat it up and I don't know. Might have been like a U shape.
okay.
Anyway. There's
Yeah, you got that. Okay,
something there.
great. Yes, sir.
When I went to started school, I think every boy in school from first grade on had a pocket knife in his pocket. Now if you get caught, I think you'd be listed as a felon. But, I probably got my first Holley knife when I was about 10 years old. I had an aunt and uncle that lived down in Lime Rock on Main Street, and they were both born in 1860. I think my aunt was born in 1868. Her dad was a Civil War veteran, and my brother and I, on occasion, would ride our bicycles from Sharon to over to Lime Rock to listen to stories about her. That's where I got my first Holley knife from them, because her husband, Charlie Bracy, ran the general store there in Lime Rock.
Wow.
And so after a while, we got that house, and I probably ended up with about 10 of the Holley knives then. And that was when I was 10 years old. Now I'm 81 years old. And I've been collecting Holley knives and Holley memorabilia all my life. I have somewhere between 16 and 1700 Holley knives. They have quite a history. Jim's got some. Mr. Boughton over there, he's a collector. He's collected a lot of Empire knives in Winston. And there's other people here in the audience too, I'm sure, who have Holley knives. But there's my family goes back quite a ways, sometimes with the Holley family. My grandfather ran a big farm, 400 acres up on Wells Hill at one time. And when he let the farm go, he became a caretaker at the Holley Williams house.
Oh,
And stayed until he passed away in 1948. And on my mother's family, my grandmother, her grandfather was a collier who was a charcoal maker and lived all over the mountain. And she said they lived in these sod huts all over Sharon Mountain about 8 or 9 months of the year. While her father burned charcoal and would make about $300 a year making charcoal. I displayed the knives a couple times at the Holley Williams house. First time I learned my lesson, one guy came and kept picking up the knife, putting it down, picking it up, put it down, and that knife disappeared.
Didn't put it down.
And then another time, I loaned some to the editor of the Lakeville Journal. I think I let him have 2 or 3 knives. And went back and asked him several times for the knives back. I never got them back. And so that's past tense. I got more than enough. But there's quite a history with it. And I bought some, I have many catalogs. I have books of the Holley family and Maria Holley's. I have a Holley Bible that was SD Holley's. It's dated 1868. I don't know who that was. You probably know better than I. And I don't mean to steal your thunder here. This is
No.
your show. But
No, that's interesting.
there's some knives that are very special that even though they're not fancy knives,
I don't think you want to pass all that.
they're listed as hobo knives.
Can you stand so we could see?
They're listed as hobo knives, but they're not a hobo knife. They were made, there was 3 different companies that made them. Holley, Ulster, and Camellias. And the Red Cross put them in Christmas packages during the First World War. And all the servicemen who were serving in France during World War I received one in a Christmas package. And so, our Legion Hall in Sharon, which I'm a member of, is named after a World War I veteran. His name was Herbert G. Cleves. And he was a 21-year-old Marine that was killed at Belle Woods, France. And I'm sure he had and I wonder, I have bought knives from Holley Knives because I'm connected with different people like Tom. And we all look for knives for each other. If we find something that somebody else is collecting, then we pass it on and let them know. That's how I first got my Charter Oak knife, which was when your grandfather was in office.
The Charter Oak came down.
As governor of Connecticut. He was one of only 2 governors that were independent, him and Alexander Holley and Lowell White. They really wanted to independent governors. Anyway, I have the Holley knife and it was sold and I have the document that goes with it. And I bought it from a man. I got somebody led me onto it. And it had been owned by the man that owned the Ohio-Baltimore Railroad. So it cost me a few bucks to buy that knife, but it's got knife and it's in very good shape. But of all the knives, I think these are most important for all the fellas. And I wonder, we have a letter in our Legion Hall that Herbert Hayes wrote back to one of his friends in Sharon, and it's framed and hangs in our Legion Hall. It tells him how he was in these 8-foot deep trenches in France, up to his knees in mud and wearing a gas mask. And then he was killed in one of the last battles of World War I at Belle Woods, France. That's why we named our Legion Hall after him. And I wonder how many of these knives are in the bottoms of those trenches.
Wow.
Touches me.
Yeah.
And I have bought one knife from a fellow in France, and I have another knife that I have bought from a fellow in Serbia. And if those knives could talk and tell the story of what those men went through, tremendous.
Oh, thanks, Bob,
Thanks,
for
Bob.
sharing. That's really nice.
I had one of my mother's family, I still have the rake from that my great grandfather used to rake charcoal and hangs in my garage.
Helen, yes.
I just want to thank you. That was so interesting. But back to the Holley family, I just want to make a comment or ask you about the politics of your family. The manufacturing company was selling these items, but I came across a receipt to Mrs. Holley, who was buying bakeware before your great grandfather's birthday, and she was charged and paid full price And I thought that was really interesting, that it was, you know, she didn't get a family discount. How much? How much? I think it was like $6.
Excellent.
But you don't have any baby wear, you don't have.
No, no, you're not.
Because I thought it was interesting that they also did kitchen items. Yeah.
Yes, ma'am. In the back.
Where did the wood come from?
The wood for charcoal
No, the wood, I'm sorry, the handle of the knives?
came from all over the place.
Some of them were rosewood.
All different types of wood.
From South America, a lot of it came from South
South
America,
America,
and the
sure.
handles were made right up at Factory Street, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the rosewood was imported and came through Hudson and came down here because we had the waterfalls. Because someone dug up one of those little salt boxes for me up on Factory Street. He was digging in his yard and he said, oh, I got so many of these things digging up, you know, a little salt container.
Yeah.
And it was rosewood, and he's telling me that it came from Hudson, brought here because we had the waterfalls.
Yeah.
And the wheels to turn them.
Yeah. Tom?
I do know from past history that in Connecticut, there was 200 companies that manufacture knives. And once a year, these companies would go to New York to the auctions. Ships came from the Orient carrying pearl, ebony from Africa, coca-cola, rosewood, bone, India stag. And they bought the material from them ships, and they bought enough to supply them with all the handle material that they needed for 1 year. So a lot of it was from the Orient ships that came to New York.
There was also a Salisbury knife handle company that specialized in making the knife handles up on and
Salisbury
on Washington Heights, and so they provided a lot of the not
The
Washington.
first Holley knives were marked Salisbury.
Yeah.
I have some that are stamped Salisbury. This is a pair of pearl handle Holley razors. They made a set of 7, but I don't have a set.
Nice.
What would the year be of that about?
Probably around late 1800s, or, you know, something 1900s.
Well, that's fine.
All right, well, thank you, everyone.